Hey, welcome back to the Consulting Mind. Today we're going to explore whether or not the ECB can do the yield curve control similar to the Bank of Japan. And we are going to talk about its feasibility, the objection involved, and some alternatives. So now let's do a very quick revision on what is yield curve control. Simply speaking, under yield curve control, the central bank will commit to buy unlimited amounts of bond that the market want to supply at some target price or target rate. And now let's use the Bank of Japan as an example again. Let's say now the Bank of Japan would like to set the 10-year Japan government bond to be, say, 0.1%. Then, whenever the bond yield rise above 0.1%, say 0.2%, 0.3%, the Bank of Japan will buy the bond such that the yield will fall below to 0.1% again, which is the target level. By doing so, the Bank of Japan can suppress the cost of borrowing, suppress the financing cost to the target level by buying a lot of bond until the bond yield fall back to the target rate. And then, once the market believes that the central bank really have the commitment and the determination to reach the target yield, they will start to internalize the commitment at the point that even though the central bank will not necessarily have to take a large amount of bond purchasing decision, they will still believe that. By doing so, the central bank might possibly save the cost in order to use relatively small amounts of money to achieve the yield control goal. That's basically how the mechanism works. And then you may wonder, so how does yield curve control differs from QE? Seems that these two are very similar. Basically, QE focus on dealing in the quantity of bond because whenever there is a QE program, whichever central bank they might be, they will always announce some details like how many target number of bond they would like to purchase, like 10 billion US dollar, 20 billion Europe, or 30 billion Japan. There's always have a specific target, a specific number over a defined period, like before the end of March of 2022, right? There's always a predefined time frame and the quantity of bond. But on the opposite, yield curve control focuses on the price of bond. Taking the Bank of Japan as an example again, you will not see that the Bank of Japan will define, I would only commit certain amounts of money to buy the bond, such that I will keep the bond yield at a certain level. No, you won't hear them saying that. You will just hear them saying that I would like to keep the bond yield at certain percentage of level with unlimited supply of money. That's the difference. One is focused on quantity and another one is focused on the price. So now, let's put things back on the ECB context. Is there any hurdle for ECB doing yield curve control? The answer is yes. To start with, there is a problem of lacking single bond to target. Remember that there are 19 EU members in the European zone, and each of them with their own sovereign bond. So there is an immediate question of which country bond to buy. Or the other question is how ECB can apportion to allocate the capital in buying into that. And the other issue is that there is a criteria for the ECB in conducting the bond purchasing program, such as no more than 1/3 of a country eligible securities can be held by ECB at any times. And then you may wonder, so how about QE? Isn't that QE will face the same problem? Well, the answer is not likely because QE can simply solve that by apportioning the asset based on the country size, like the GDP, the capital contributed to the ECB. Remember, the fundamental difference between QE and yield curve control is that QE always with a finite number of bond to purchase. ECB, Bank of Japan will always declare a particular number for the bond purchase program during a period. No matter APP, the asset purchase program, the PPP pandemic emergency purchasing program, there is always a defined time frame and quantity of bond to be purchased. So in this sense, they really don't have the problem of permanently fixing the allocation problem because the capital to be allocated is a finite number. But then on the other hand, the capital, the money to be allocated under yield curve control context is theoretically unlimited and cannot be estimated. Another hurdle prohibiting ECB from doing yield curve control is that they are not allowed by EU law from directly financing government. The rationale behind is that if a central bank systematically finances government budget, it can fall prey to a so-called fiscal dominance, and perhaps might fail its price stability mandate. This is because when inflation starts to rise, the central bank will be in a lose-lose situation. It will be either continuing financing the deficit and risk overshooting its objective, or if it can refuse to finance the deficit and risk a deflationary government default. So both would not be an ideal outcome for a central bank to face. And then you may have the same question in mind again. So what about QE? Let's start with the definition again. Monetary financing means that a direct transfer of money for the government to spend. But QE does not really constitute direct monetary financing because the purchase happened in secondary market. Let's use equity markets as an example. Let's say today, you're buying some Amazon stock in the equity market, right? Does that mean that you directly provide the funding to Amazon? Not really, because all you have done is that you provide liquidity in the secondary market. There is a transaction happened between you and the seller, but this does not really inject the extra capital to Amazon because that already happened in the primary market, i.e. the IPO phases. So when the central bank, when ECB printing a lot of money doing the QE, the government do not really receive any sort of money from ECB, though they will be benefit from them because their funding costs will be lower. But the fact is that they did not directly receive any funding from the QE program itself. So that's a very fundamental difference between. So simply speaking, monetary financing will involve the creation of central bank money to finance government deficit, likely in a permanent situation. So in this regard, remember again, QE is always with a finite time frame. The program will end someday, like by 2 year, 3 year. So in this context, it will likely not constitute lending money to government in permanent fashion. It's just temporary with a predefined period. So having mentioned that the technical difficulty facing by the ECB, does that mean that they will give up this option for doing yield curve control? The answer is kind of ambiguous because there is actually some alternative in between, i.e. the implicit yield curve control. What does that mean? The ECB can anyhow keep the yield low, even though they will not claim, they will not admit that this is yield curve control. But then what they will actually do is they can keep buying bond, suppressing the yield until they feel like that the financial condition will not be further tightening. So the definition of the financial condition will not be tightening is very broad, very ambiguous. But that's actually what they're saying in the press release or in other public occasion. So this really gives them some flexibility and strategic options for conducting this kind of monetary policy. On one hand, they will not admit that this is yield curve control, so they will not break the technical requirement or any legal requirement. But then on the other hand, they can also create some faith or create some confidence to the market that ECB is going to back up the bond market. So there are some art behind that. This is about how the central bank is going to communicate or even manipulating the market expectation. They will never admit that they are doing yield curve control. But then the interesting thing is that seems like that they're really doing yield curve control. if you see from the outcome. So that's all my sharing with you today. If you like the content, please click the like button for me and subscribe to the channel. See you soon.